Welcome back to Two Who's Review, the Doctor Who podcast. I'm Alex.
I'm Fitz.
And today we're going to be looking at the latest episode at the time of recording, Legend of the Sea Devils. This is our first 13th Doctor episode that we're discussing, and her second last overall, so what a good time for it.
Yeah, that works well.
Yeah. Little bit of fourth wall breaking for the viewers. So the reason that we started doing this podcast initially is after the Legend of the Sea Devils trailer came out, we both started discussing Doctor Who again, and we thought, okay, let's get back into that podcast we tried 3 years ago. And the initial plan was to get these out early enough so that by the time this episode aired, we'd already have a few episodes up and running. And that didn't happen for various reasons. Even more, we were meant to be recording this episode on the day it came out. There were various health problems, surprisingly not on your end. This time it was me who had some health risks that put off recordings. I got COVID, and then a flu, and then a cough, and the world in the last... I did not have a good April, let's put it that way. I didn't...
Yeah.
It was kind of rough. But we're here now.
We are.
And I will say, I did watch this episode the day it aired, did you?
Yes. Yes, I did.
Okay.
Yeah, I did.
We initially planned to do this the day it aired. Then we planned to do it the week after. And then we had to push that back as well. And I have rewatched it since, and I'm glad I did, because I could not remember any of this episode after I first watched it.
I watched it again too, and I'm also glad that I did, because I remember just my first gut reaction to the story. I wouldn't say it was, like, super forgettable, but, like, the phrase that crept into my mind after watching it the first time was, this is just, like, a bang-on average episode. Like, it is, like, a solid, complete middle ground, nothing super terrible about it, but nothing really all that interesting at all about it. It's, again, bang on average. And the thing with that is, it's funny, but, and we talked about this with The Unquiet Dead, I used to think that The Unquiet Dead was a bang on average episode, but the good parts in The Unquiet Dead are way better than really anything that's in Legend of the Sea Devils,
absolutely,
I think.
Absolutely. This,
so
that
was...
It continues a weird revived Doctor Who tradition of the Easter specials being kind of bad, because there's only been 2 of them. This and Planet of the Dead, the only 2009 special with David Tennant that everyone seems to have forgotten about completely, where the bus gets trapped on the desert
in the desert.
Yeah, because
I remember that episode a little bit.
I remember a little bit of it.
Flying Stingrays,
yeah. But the problem with that episode is that it's sandwiched between The Next Doctor, which was a marketing stunt of a Christmas special, and The Waters of Mars, which is fantastic. So it kind of gets lost in the shuffle. Yeah. And in a similar way, like, why is this a special episode? If this aired during a season, it would not, like... There's nothing special about it.
Yeah, not terribly.
Like, when you think of like when they do a one-off special episode, it's either like a Christmas episode, an anniversary episode, or it's a story that, like, really, really stands out as something that you can only do once. Like with Waters of Mars, when you have David Tennant's heel turn into a villainous take on the Doctor. Like, that kind of story warrants a special, but this is just an episode.
Yeah, it's very... Yeah, again, bang on average. Well, the funny thing was, so I watched it once, and again, the bang on average impression, that's what I got. But then I watched it again, and the bits that were bad were worse than I remembered, but the bits that were slightly better were slightly even better than I remembered. So it's frustrating and weird, but, like, it both annoys me more now, but it's also there's some small parts of it that grew on me a little bit in that second viewing. But overall, it is still, again, just a really milquetoast, bang on average episode. There's not much.
I'm so curious to hear what those bits that grew on you were, because I'm struggling to remember
Yeah.
what they could
Yeah.
possibly be now. Let's go through our timescales ratings. for
Yeah,
this
would they
episode.
would there be a lot of them up at this point because it's a new episode? I'd wondered how that would work.
Just about to cough. We'll cut it out. Okay. No, there are 70 votes for this episode currently on the website.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah, I think past ones we've done have had votes in the hundreds, depending on which episode it is.
Yeah.
But out of 70 votes, this has an average rating of 5.3.
Yeah. I mean,
I would probably put it a bit lower than that, personally, but I can kind of see where that is. Like, you do... There's bizarrely a similar amount of people who have rated this between 10 and 9 and between 1 and 2.
okay.
Which is, I think, is kind of funny.
That's interesting. I'll give him that. Okay, sure.
So it has a 4.8 for plot. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's...
the plot was strange, and we are definitely going to get into that later on, but there are some creative choices where I'm like, oh, who's the name of, Chibnall wrote it, who's the name of the other writer?
Ella Road.
Someone, pardon?
Ella Road is the other writer.
Isn't it Lord? It's not Lord, is it? Or maybe I'm thinking of...
It says Ella Road right here.
Okay, well, yeah, Ella Road. Either way, I'm watching the episode, I'm like, really? Chibnall and Ella Road? Those are interesting plot developments. I'm kind of questioning that, but as I say, we'll definitely get into that later on.
Yeah. I mean, it's so strange because it's kind of like a middle ground between a standard invasion story and just like the purest form of nonsense.
Yeah.
That's kind of the best way I can describe it, because it really is. It kind of does feel a bit like, okay, this is a special, we kind of need to put a lot of stuff in here, but they didn't make it a special's length in order to justify it.
Yeah.
It has a...
yeah.
What was that, sorry?
Oh, yeah, things they... Like, there's a fair bit that happens in it, but it's not, as you say, it's not hugely memorable, so it's kind of odd the way the plot just kind of sort of stretches out throughout the episode, so...
It has a 6.3 for acting. Again, I kind of see that. I mean,
yeah.
No one's bad in this. It's just that no one's particularly memorable, like you said about the plot, really.
Yeah, I mean... Yeah, I mean, maybe... We'll get into that later on, and then perhaps more will come to mind, but... Yeah, I can understand why someone would say that.
6.1 for effects.
Yeah. Effects weren't too bad.
Yeah, they weren't awful.
It was funny, but when I saw the trailer for this episode, I thought that they were going to do like really animatronics heavy heads for the Sea Devils. And granted, special effects, it's not my area of expertise, but I think when you watch it, you can very clearly see it's like a mask that's had some CG put on it, and it looks fine.
Is it CG or is it just like very like subtle, like mechanical movements of the mouth?
Yeah, well, again, I thought when watching the trailer that's what they did. They just did some animatronics with it, but I think there's just something with the movement of the eyes. It looks too... Yeah, it looks too CG, I think. Which is... Again, it's fine. It does its job decently enough. But it's not like... It's not even like the Jadoon, which, when you look at them, you can clearly tell it's with an animatronic thing. Here it's... The fact that I'm finding it difficult to tell the difference between, whether it's animatronic or CG, sort of indicates where it is. I think there is, I don't know, maybe some animatronics, but for the most part, I think it's just a little bit of CG overlaid onto a rubber mask or something. And again,
Yeah.
it's fine. It does its job decently enough. There's nothing. I don't think there's anything that really bothered me with the CG. I mean, maybe the giant, sort of Loch Ness monster thing they've gotten it. Maybe that wasn't like the most super realistic CG effect from memory, but it was fine. And with Doctor Who, doesn't bother me.
It has a 5.1 on replay value. Yeah, very fair. There's no real reason to rewatch this.
Yeah, again, it was slightly better than I remembered it the second time, but only slightly, and it's only because of a couple of little moments in the end there, so...
It's interesting. If it weren't for the adding on to the Dr. Yaz dynamic that's building, and God knows we'll talk about that, there would be zero reason to rewatch this episode. It would be one of those where you're like,
yep.
on a rewatch, if you're just going for plot important episodes, give this a miss.
Yeah.
And we'll see how it ties into the Centenary special.
Yep. That's
But yeah, it's very it's very skippable.
Yeah, that's the impression that I got too. Like, especially the first time watching it, I'm like, Yaz and the Doctor romance implications, and that's basically it in terms of memorability. There's not really anything here that
It doesn't even really add much to the Sea Devils.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, I was kind of surprised because, as we know now from watching the Sea Devils, and especially, if we ever take a look at the Doctor and the Silurians, but there's a lot of stuff you can tackle there. It's pretty thematically rich, and it gets both in the Sea Devils and especially in the Silurians pretty intense thematically. Because it's talk of genocide. I'm pretty sure, and even sort of railing against imperialism at certain points, and I'm like, I don't know. I think I wanted deep down for the writing to tackle those themes, but I kind of knew on a surface level it's like, we'll be really lucky if they even try to get to sort of deep, intense themes with this episode. And I was right, because they didn't really. The closest we ever got was that one moment when
when the Doctor says that they came from Earth.
No, well, that was one of them, but I don't know why. Yeah, when the bit where Ji-hun is about kills the Sea Devil, and the Doctor's like, you don't have to kill him, and like, it kind of reminded me a little bit of things like the Sea Devils and the Silurians, because it harkens back to the fact that the Doctor, is trying to broker a peace between humans and Silurians / Sea Devils. But that's only because of those other episodes. There's actually nothing all that special about the Doctor saying you didn't have to kill him. Like any Doctor could have said that about most side characters. So again, that for me is like the closest we got to those sort of deeper, interesting themes, and even then, it like barely got close. So
it's a real shame as well, because you remember how much I loved that Sea Devil story from when we watched it last week.
Yeah.
I adored that story, and then to see them in this, and they're basically just monsters.
Yeah, and again, and when we discussed the Cedar story, I know my feelings on it weren't as positive as yours, although we kind of came to a kind of a middle, more of a middle ground by the end of it. But even then, with that kind of intense gut reaction I had to the Sea Devils, it is still a really good episode.
That comes from somewhere, though.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, when I was watching this latest episode, I'm like, at least with the Sea Devils, even if I didn't think it quite stuck the landing in terms of, I don't know, thematic consistency, I guess you could call it, at least it tried to do something, and it actually did that something pretty damn well. Even if, again, the ending wasn't as satisfying as I wanted it to be, at least they really tried to do something with it, and they went pretty far in sort of looking at these pretty serious themes. So to see them not even really try in this episode was, again, not surprising, but it was still disappointing, which is a damn shame. And that And that doesn't even get to how I feel about Doctor Who and the Silurians in comparison. And again, it's been a long time since I've watched that episode, but that episode is even better in terms of those themes than the Sea Devils is, as far as I'm concerned. So to see them go from that to this really, again, bang on average, run of the mill, very forgettable story, it's like, man, what happened?
This 15 out of 63 people say that this story requires a previous story to understand.
15 out of 63, did you say?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It does. I mean,
Yeah.
in terms of the Sea Devils, it really doesn't, because it has zero connection to who they were in the past. But you do miss, like, did you watch Eve of the Daleks?
No.
Okay, that's where that is where they began to properly seed the Dr. Yaz relationship.
Yeah.
So
I think I saw a clip from it, and when she's talking to Dan about it. But
yes.
Yeah.
So a lot of that stuff you do kind of need to have watched that first for this, but for the larger story, no, it's standalone.
No. I think you might need a little bit too with Dan and the woman who he's
Oh yeah, that's true, but that's a minute long conversation, so.
Yeah, it's not as like foundational as Dr. Yaz thing.
Yeah, for most of the story, you don't need it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I'd agree. Like, certainly the story itself, like what it is, it's not because again, they, as you say, they don't really connect it to any of the previous Sea Devil Silurian stories. Which again, and that's such a shame, because what they did was they took this really interesting creature and sort of species where they could have looked at all these interesting themes, and they just made them, your standard baddie.
Yeah.
Standard baddie running around, getting treasures, killing enemies. Yeah,
it's a shame.
Standard enemy. It's kind of frustrating.
And I can, we'll get to this, but I can kind of see why they chose, because you could have made up a new aquatic monster for this episode, and it would have been the exact same. But I can understand why you'd want to use the Sea Devils. Just purely for marketability. You can say, we're bringing back this long forgotten classic series monster, tune into our Easter special.
Yeah,
despite the fact they barely advertised it.
Yeah, it's a nostalgia value.
Yeah. Also, it is currently the 6th lowest rated 13th Doctor story, which is surprising, honestly. I'm looking at a lot of these rankings of 13th Doctor stories and going, man, I can count so many of these that are way worse than Legend of the Sea Devils.
Yeah, again, I don't know. I've seen, I think Flux and Eve of the Daleks, I think those are the only 13th Doctor episodes I haven't seen.
Right.
So, maybe I'm lacking just knowledge and experience here. But yeah, I guess having it placed there, it makes sense to me. But there may very well be, episodes or even moments of episodes that I'm not thinking of that would place it higher. So, yeah.
To be clear, like, the 5.3 rating for this episode that it's been given by the Timescales reviewers, solid. Keep that.
Yeah.
But several of our other 13th Doctor episodes have been ranked way too highly, in my opinion. I'm almost looking forward to when we actually catch up to the 13th Doctor stories, because that's when we're really going to be able to, like, because for the most part, when we've been doing these Timescales reviews, we're reviewing the reviews on the Timescales before we launch into our actual reviews on the episodes. For the most part, we've gone, I get that. That makes sense. I'm looking forward to eventually being able to just go, no, this is absolutely not. What?
Yeah, I do hope that point comes at some point. It will be very interesting. But yeah, we'll have to wait and see if any point like that comes up. But hopefully,
also, side note, so interestingly, when you look at just 2022 TV specials, the highest rated thing on there is Centenary Special Trailer. That's funny to me. All right, let's get into a synopsis.
Okay, yeah.
When the legendary pirate queen Zheng Yishao, alias Madam Ching, I can't believe I got the Chinese name correct and then botched it on the word awakens. Let's say awakens. Awakens an antediluvian sea devil extremist. The Doctor's TARDIS is pulled off course, and Team TARDIS must try to work together with the historical rogue to save the entire Earth from global flood. But amidst the high-stakes, high-seas adventure, it soon becomes clear the stakes for everyone involved, even the 13th Doctor and Yaz, are much more personal than a legendary sunken treasure or even the all-important Keystone. No, they're not. It's brought up so rushed and haphazardly. Alright, let's get into it. So, right off the bat, the dialogue in this can be woof at times.
Oh, yeah. Again, and I've said this before, huge problems with dialogue in Chibnall's era. Way too much exposition as far as I'm concerned, and it's so frustrating because they occur on tiny little detailed levels, like hardline edit sort of levels, so it wouldn't even be that difficult to fix them, because they don't actually correspond all that much, or a lot of them at least, to the overall plot. I mean, don't get me wrong, the plot is a whole other thing, but like in terms of the dialogue itself, if you just like cut lines, change lines, you could make it a bit better at least, and it's so clear, like, the writers just aren't doing that, and it is so frustrating. There are, oh god, let me... Okay, so here are the two examples from this episode I think of when I think of this issue. One, when Dan and Yaz... No, sorry, not Dan and Yaz. Dan and... why am I forgetting this? The young guy who's with them on the ship.
Yun Key?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. When they're both stowaways on Madam Ching's ship, there's a bit where she literally just says, "Oh, stowaways," or something like that. I'm like, did you really have to have that dialogue in there? We know they're stowaways because they're standing on your ship and they're hiding from you. Why is that dialogue there? What is the point? Or another example, later on when the Doctor is talking about the head of these Sea Devils, she says, this one's got quite a bit of an ego. He's more of a zealot than the other ones I've met. Okay, I'm gonna break this down.
Oh no!
And I don't care how melodramatic this sounds.
Okay, but just before you do, I don't think this has happened on the podcast yet. But whenever you go into that tone, like mid-sentence, I know it's going to be a really fun rant from you. It's like when okay, I just need to explain this very quickly. Like you get into that higher timbre of your voice, and I can almost feel like you're leaning into the mic a little bit, and and that's good because as you leaned into the mic to start this, I leant back in my seat, going, "Oh, this will be good."
Thank you. Okay, here's the thing with that line. So the zealot part, more of a zealot than I'm used to, that's fine, that works. I mean, maybe the dialogue's not perfect, but it does its job. But that first bit, he's got quite a bit of an ego, just cut that. Just get rid of it. It doesn't need to be there. Why is it in the script? You are literally saying who the character is, with expositionary dialogue. There's no point, and it's, oh god, like, I don't know.
It's the kind of line it's the kind of dialogue that should be evident if the character is better written.
Yeah, exactly. This is, as cliched as it sounds, it genuinely is a case of show don't tell. Why are you telling us this? We don't need to hear this. And unfortunately for Chibnall, and the writers who work for him, this is a problem that crops up consistently in his run. I remember when Revolution of the Daleks came out, and immediately after watching it, I think I sent you a message saying how much I really disliked it. But one of the big criticisms, again, was the terrible dialogue. You literally had people saying, "Oh, hello, look, it's this character. Oh, he seems like a really this sort of person. Oh no, like, don't put it in the script. Cut it out, man. Like, this script is what? The episode's how long? Like 50 minutes? You could probably cut like, I don't know, like 10 minutes at least without all the exposition.
You cut
and I don't
10
know,
minutes. You cut 10 minutes of expository dialogue until you can add back in the actual ethical complexity that the Sea Devils used to have.
It's so frustrating because, and here's the thing, maybe it's a bit rich for me to be throwing stones at this point, because I'm a writer, and I've had these problems in my writing before, and they're painful when you have to sort of take a step back and say, oh well, this piece of dialogue's terrible. Why did I put it in the script or whatever? But I think when I watched Revolution of the Daleks, I'd just gotten finished with my honors degree, and I'd gotten back feedback for the stage play that I wrote for it, and there was a lot of there was a fair bit of criticism with some of the dialogue, and I read it again, and I'm like, wow, yeah, the dialogue in this script is really bad. But here's the thing. Having done that, I think now I've become very sensitive to really bad expository dialogue. So when I then watched Revolution of the Daleks, I'm like, oh no, what is happening? And then I went and looked at other Chibnall era episodes, and I'm like, oh my god, it's been here all along. How did I not notice this? This is so bad.
Yeah. There's also the extra layer of it being, well, you're like you're a fresh honors student just off his degree.
Exactly.
And this is the showrunner of one of the longest running series of all time.
Yeah,
like, there should be a higher standard.
Yeah, exactly. Like, these are, professionals working on one of the oldest TV shows ever. And it's just... and I apologize perhaps to you and to the audience as well, sort of going off on this tangent, but it's really important, I think, that I make this clear. It is so frustrating having to watch this sort of stuff in Chibnall era Doctor Who, because even if you compare it to classic Doctor Who, which I hope I've made very clear from the beginning, yes, it's very flawed. If you're going to be a grown-up serious fan of classic Doctor Who, you are going to have to start off by making a lot of concessions, and one of those concessions is quality control over not just special effects, but over story, over characterization, over story arcs. Not always fantastic, but like, even some of the episodes that we've been watching, for this podcast, they don't seem to be making these same mistakes in the same way, and not to the same extent.
It's not, I know that there are people who are going to be like, listening to us criticize this and then go, oh, but the classic series did it as well. But that's not an excuse. Like, you can't say, oh, if it's bad now, why isn't it bad then? Like, no, it was bad then too, but we've had 60 years to learn from it.
And, it...
and also, it's a problem that didn't really exist in the Russell T Davies era or the Moffat era. Like, it's cropped up significantly in this era, and I think the main reason behind that is because basically every single character has been written at just the surface level. Like, it's taken a lot to find a side character in this era that has any kind of complexity to them, and it's that kind of complexity that means you don't have to write in the expository dialogue, because when you have the complexity, you can do more and you can show more. But when your character is stuck on sort of the meniscus of the ocean, that's all you can write about. So you have to keep, when you want to write about characters talking about other characters, all you can do is just reiterate the only thing that's there. When you have those layers, and when you have that depth, and when you have all those that interesting complexity that we love in our characters, you can do more than just the expository dialogue. But that's not what we've been given.
Yeah, it's definitely true. And it's just... Again, it's so frustrating because, as I said, as a Classic Who fan, again, I've got to be honest. Yeah, there are a lot of flaws in the Classic series. Now, I actually love the Classic series because of those flaws, and I think I mentioned this in the first episode of this podcast. But I love them, yes, on an ironic level, but also on a more sincere level because, again, it shows that Classic Who is a show that's willing to take risks, willing to do something different, something strange, and even if the risks don't always pay off, which they definitely don't always do, it's still part of the whole magic of it. But even in that context, again, I will freely admit, I have to be honest here. Yes, there are flaws, and we shouldn't try to be dishonest and kind of view Classic Who through nostalgia goggles and say, oh, it's this wonderful, epitome of brilliant television. Yeah, maybe sometimes it is. Maybe there's some really wonderful episodes, but again, even some of the best episodes, those flaws are definitely evident. And again, I have to be honest about it. It's why, because I used to be a person who thinks, oh, well, if you don't like Classic Who, like, oh, you're really a fan. Well, actually, yeah, you are. If you don't, just because you may not like Classic Who, that doesn't make you any less of a fan than anybody else.
Yeah.
And we should, again, we need to be honest about both eras, and we need to move beyond our nostalgia goggles, or I don't know, revival goggles, I guess you could call them. And overall, just be honest about the quality of the shows that we've been given. And overall, unfortunately, we just seem to have hit a low point with Chibnall's run. That we didn't get. We definitely didn't get it in the RTD era. And as many problems as I have with Stephen Moffat's era, I honestly don't think it was this consistently frustrating either. So, God help us, frankly.
Well, there's actually... I want to keep talking about the dialogue a little bit, and maybe this will lead into the characters we get in this episode. Because, I have a problem with this dialogue on a bigger layer than just the expository nature of it. And I think the best way I can do that is to describe the first lines we get from Madam Ching in this story. I don't know if you remember them, because they're kind of nothing lines, but they stuck out.
But anyway,
they stuck out at me at a core level. Something like these lines have stayed with me. Maybe I think these lines have been what's exacerbated my illness, because they've just been festering. They've been just bubbling under the surface for the last couple of weeks, and it's
anyway,
the acrid black ooze that you get in so many things. You'll see this stuff coursing through my veins and just rotting me from the inside out, because they stayed with me so much. Ying Kee's father, who is the protector of the Keystone, as Madam Ching is attempting to desecrate the Sea Devil statue, he approaches her and gives her a threat. I don't remember what the threat is. Something like
it's you can't open the statue, or you'll unleash power or something like that.
Something like that. But it was also something a bit more of a bit more of a threat. I don't remember the exact line. But Madam Ching responds with, "I was going to say the same to you," and then there's a pause, and we see the statue crack a bit more. But it's obvious that that's there to give time for the next line that she gives to be badass, because that's the narrative beat. That's what this is. That's it's so obvious. And she draws her sword on that bit as well. So that's meant to be the big action hero, top of line that happens right before a fight starts, and it leaves audiences going, "Oh man, this is going to be sick." So, but the line in its entirety, the line is, "I was going to say the same thing to you, beat, before I killed you."
Yeah, I remember that actually, and when I watched it...
It is such a weak opening line for this character. And the fact that it is very clearly meant to be this big badass moment... Is this an incomplete script? Is that a placeholder line? Was there meant to be was there something in the margins of the script that was add in good line here? Because that is a line that you would expect to see in a primary school play written by the kids.
Yeah, and I remember actually, I can't believe I forgot, how bad that line was, because I think it was even the first time when I watched it, I think I actually looked back, just sort of tracked back with the timestamp to see if she'd actually said it, and I heard the line, and I'm like, yeah, that is really bad. And also taking it back to this point of needless exposition, that particular line, "before I kill you," is completely pointless.
Yep.
It is completely pointless in the context of the scene because we know she's about to try and kill this person because she's holding a sword on him. Why is that line there? Like, what?
It's there because either Chris Chibnall or Ella Road, but probably Chris Chibnall, wanted to make this character a badass and like a, you know, this epic figure, which they presumably are in history. I don't know Madam Ching that well from history. But he couldn't think of anything to make her say to actually demonstrate that because she doesn't actually want to kill him. Like, all she wants is her crew back. She wants to get the treasure to pay off the ransom that these other people are giving her crew. Again, I'm not sure if that's historically accurate or not. We should.
But either way,
we've had time to do this research. We didn't do it. That's on us. But like, then when the guy does die to the Sea Devil, she does very little to say, you know, oh, I didn't do this. It was the monster, and that's literally all you have to say. Those words. As a result, Yin Ki for a lot of the episode is on this, you know, vendetta. I'm gonna get revenge for my dad kind of thing, and we know that that's bullshit. We know that is pointless, and it's so good. It's so great to finally be talking about a bad episode.
Yeah, it's very frustrating. And again, as I said, that bit of dialogue, yeah, it's just pointless. We do not, if you are holding your sword to somebody, like, you know, just jabbing it at them, we don't need you to say, before I kill you, because we can assume you're about to try and kill them. Which, again, just on a basic, hard line level, that line just shouldn't be there. And it just sticks out like a sore thumb.
It's such a shame as well, because I really wanted this character to be memorable.
Yeah, same. It could, like a pirate queen. How cool would that have been?
Yeah, exactly. It's a pirate queen in Doctor Who. This should have been such a memorable figure. But the dialogue surrounding her, the actions that she takes, it just makes her so the opposite of that. Like, does she actually do anything in this story?
And one of the more frustrating things about her, I think, is the most interesting part of her character gets revealed really close to the end, where we find out that, you know, the reason why she's trying to get this treasure is to ransom her crew, including some of her sons. And I thought, wow, what an interesting, great little bit of drama. You know, why aren't we minding that? That's the story. Yeah. That's what we really need to talk about. And we will, by the way, talk about how that all fits into the plot when we get to it. But
well, hang on, does it?
Yeah, why? Well,
does it fit into the plot, or is it something that they added into a scene to be? No, she has a backstory. She's got stuff there. We're just putting it in this one conversation so that we can just ignore it for the rest of the episode and have our swashbuckling adventure on the high seas.
More accurately, how it should have worked into the plot. And again, we'll get to it. Shortly. But that's her most interesting quality as a character, and they barely gave any screen time or attention to it. It's just, sad backstory, that's what I'm actually doing. Could have been really interesting, but no, we're just going to chuck it in the last, I think it's the last 15 minutes we find out about that, if that. So, that was all frustrating. Now, there is actually one small little thing that I want to bring up as well, because it was so strange when I saw it, and it's a little detail, but it really, for me, just speaks to the quality control issues that we've got with Chibnall's era. So, when the first guy dies from the Sea Devil, the direction and the editing of that sequence is very, very bizarre.
Oh, yeah.
Because what it is, it's guy on the ground, cut to Sea Devil raising the sword, sword coming down, but then, after the sword comes down, after presumably he's been hit with it, it cuts back to the guy screaming on the ground, and I thought, what the hell is happening here? Because
this entire episode is edited really weirdly in parts.
If they did it so that, it's, goes from guy on the ground, reverse shot to the Sea Devil with the sword, and then, as the sword swings down, cuts right to the opening theme, that'd be fine. That's a classic Doctor Who
Yeah.
Shock effect. It's doing less is more.
Yeah.
It's not making it too gratuitous.
It's
This has been done over and over and over
it's
again.
implying a lot more
than you're seeing.
Yeah, exactly.
This has been done, back in the classic series, both for budgetary and censorship constraints.
Yes.
So to then have that really awkward bit of editing where we're seeing this guy who hasn't, had the effects of the sword on him yet, but has presumably been hit by it, that is just so strange and awkward. And I'm like, who edited this?
It almost feels
just even visually, who edited this? What is happening?
It almost feels like this episode maybe was 5 or 10 minutes longer, and then when they cut it down, as a result, the editing took a hit from that, because there were a lot of times, especially in the climax of this episode, in the third act, when I was kind of like, wait, what's happening? Where are we? What's going on? Whoa! When did they? What? Like, there's a lot of moments, especially when the ship's rising and falling, and when they're swinging between the two pirate ships. I'm sort of like, why is it edited that way? It's so weird. It's both times the Doctor says Geronimo is off camera. When you want to see the Doctor swing, why would you not want to see the Doctor physically swing from one floating pirate ship to one that's on the sea? That as an image would surely be something that you would want to put a lot of effort into, because that's your money shot. Why would you decide to do that as a wide shot between the two ships as opposed to looking at the thing we all want to be looking at?
Yep. Yeah, that's a good point. I'd forgotten that's how they did it. Again, I think, as you said, I'm now starting to realize there's, I think, a fair few things in this episode that are a bit forgettable. Well, anyway, but...
Or is it just that you heard the Doctor say Geronimo and had Matt Smith flashbacks and was kind of like zoning
honestly,
out for a little bit?
I forgot she said it.
Okay. You want to use this as a transition to start talking about our main cast?
Yeah, why not?
Dan, easy. He does nothing. Move on.
Yeah, I mean...
He's very pointless in this story.
Like, yeah. Oh, actually... No, we'll wait till we get to these other issues. But, yeah, like... Again, this speaks to kind of the forgettableness of this, but yeah, like, what does he do? Like, I remember him being on the ship, but, like... Was there a point to that? Or...
There would have been if he'd been able to talk Yin Ki out of his bloodlust, but he didn't. No, there is something. He mows down a whole lot of Sea Devils in one, like, strike next to Jihon, but that's it. Like, that could have been anyone, or didn't need to be there. That's all he does. And it's such a shame, because he was one of the elements of Flux that I actually liked. Like, Dan was really good in Flux, and in both of these specials, he's been wasted. I will say, his phone call with Diane at the end, genuinely moving.
Yeah, it was pretty good. And I think, because I've seen one episode of Flux, but even then, he does have a kind of, sort of a lovable, kind of goofball quality to him that makes him quite endearing, and it's a shame...
He's like a big teddy bear.
Yeah, that he's not being used in a better way. So, yeah, I can understand your frustrations with that.
Yaz also does nothing in this, but that's nothing new.
I, hadn't thought about that element that much, but, like... Yeah... I mean, yeah, it's would you say it's the Doctor who's mainly driving the plot here, or no?
It's the Doctor. For so much of this arc and this run of episodes from Chibnall, the Doctor is the only one that's ever allowed to do anything. There's except if it's the sacrifice play, in which case she's very happy to just let someone else take the fall. Which you kind of need, but you would expect the Doctor to put up some kind of a fight, or be, taken out of the action in some way to force someone else to make the sacrifice play. That's what normally happens, so it doesn't betray the character, so it's not just the Doctor going, okay, I've got to do this. Oh, what, someone else can? Neat, I can live. Which again happens in this with Jihon.
Mm-hmm.
Like, the thing I always equate it to is the River Song thing. Like, when she makes her sacrifice play to save the Doctor, she physically restrains him. And the entire time that it's happening, he's begging. He's like, let me go, let me do this. I physically cannot imagine this Doctor doing that.
Yeah, yeah, fair. It's I think watching it a second time, I think I found Ji-hoon's sacrifice to be kind of moving.
I think it narratively it makes sense, and I do like that. He does the whole, I'm out of time. Let me do this. I like the character of Ji-hoon in this. I think he's really cool.
Yeah, they have some interesting. Even the writing choices are quite good. Like the fact that we think, what is he doing? He's forcing his crew to jump off the ship. Why is he doing that? But then it turns out he had noble intentions. So that is kind of interesting.
Yeah.
For me, one of the more interesting and indeed endearing parts of the episode. But yeah, I hadn't given much thought to the whole Doctor letting people sacrifice their lives, but yeah, I guess that makes sense. Again, I'm just now realizing how much of this episode is quite forgettable, which is really kind of frustrating in its own way, but anyway,
it shouldn't be. It's a special episode. This should have been memorable. This should have had a reason to exist. Oh, wait, it does have a reason to exist. Let's talk about the Doctor and Yaz. Okay, so you already know what my opinion is on the Doctor dating a human or falling in love with a human. Shouldn't happen. And I think I said in the first episode of this, when I was running down all the Doctor-human relationships, I said I hate that's why they're going with the Doctor and Yaz. I think they are kind of sidestepping it with the Doctor doing the whole, I'll outlive everyone. I'm gonna have to watch you all move on, which I do like that aspect of the character, and I do like that that's the angle that they're taking, at least at this point. But the one thing that I will never understand and I will never forgive with this episode is the Doctor's big speech of, if it was going to be with anyone, it would be with you. Because no, absolutely not. And if you're going to say, what, you're homophobic? It's like, no, it's just not an interesting dynamic. Like, I forgot about that. What is it about Yaz that would make the Doctor gravitate to her? Because, hang on. I'll rephrase the question. Just what is it about Yaz? Can anybody name a single defining character trait that she has? She's nothing. She is by far the least interesting companion that Doctor Who has ever had. Ever.
I don't know if I'd go that far, but...
Who is she? What drives her? We don't know the answers to these questions. See, when she was initially introduced, it was with Graham and Ryan, right? And they they had a lot more of the character stuff. Graham was genuinely a great character. He had a lot of humor and all that stuff. And Ryan had dyspraxia occasionally. And Yaz was...
And the dynamic between them was fine enough.
The dynamic between them was really good. They had their character arc in season 11 with Grace. That was their arc. And then Yaz was just kind of there. Then in season 12, the big focus was to the Doctor and the Timeless Children arc. And then the Yaz was just there again. So then when Ryan and Graham left the show, I was really excited. I was like, okay, they can finally give Yaz some focus. We can finally learn about her. And then Flux happens, and she gets nothing. And then now we're supposed to believe that out of every human that the Doctor has ever met, like in her thousands of years of travels, Yaz is the one that she's like, you're the most interesting human I've ever met. You're like brilliant. And I was like, I was listening to this and I was like, I don't believe this dialogue. This is Chris Chibnall just remembering that Yaz doesn't have anything and giving her a romance to the Doctor. Because that's what it is.
Yeah.
Like this
that's entirely
This
true.
was maybe hinted at once before Eve of the Daleks. And even then it was in a scene that had nothing to do with the rest of the episode. This is a romance that even people who like if you to some degree, as much as I hate Doctor-human relationships, to some degree I understand why they happened. Doctor and Rose I get it. She made him better after the Time War. Fine. Like, he's been through some extreme circumstances. The Time War took so much of his humanity out of him, and she brought it back. That's all the justification you need. If that's, fine. I'm happy enough with that explanation. Doctor and River, like I said, it's its own kettle of fish. She's technically a Time Lord. That exists outside of it.
Yeah, which is true.
But this is just... It's something that... Again, like, I don't subscribe to the whole Doctor Who is woke now thing. I just don't. I don't subscribe to this theory that the show is bad because it's politically correct. Because obviously, that's not why the show is bad.
Mm. Oh, yeah.
You're insane.
No, it's bad because the writing is bad.
It's bad because it's written poorly. And this feels like something that they've thrown in to try and go,
Yeah,
see, look, LGBT representation, we're doing a lesbian relationship, despite the fact that the last companion of the Moffat era, Bill, was also lesbian, and she was handled significantly better than Yaz because she actually had characteristics beyond lesbian. She had a relationship that made sense. She was interesting character. She was fun to watch. When she left the show, I was genuinely upset because she was so fun. But Yaz is like the exact opposite of that, and the fact that the Doctor has that line where it's like, you're the... And, okay, I know I've been talking about this for a while, but I do want to say, the thing that made me the most upset is that they used imagery of the TARDIS being at the bottom of the ocean to set it up.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm so upset that they wasted that imagery on it, because at its core, that is a fantastic image.
Yeah.
Like, when you think... I can't believe it hasn't been done.
Yeah, you'd think.
It's 59 years into the show's run. I can't believe this is the first time we've gone... So if the doors can open in space, they must be able to open underwater as well.
And I have to admit, even, as a Classic Who fan here, I can't think of really any moments where they've done that. I mean, I don't
know how they could have done it.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure they've had moments with the TARDIS underwater, but nothing... nothing like that.
Like
so
this,
it is kind of strange.
So, it was like the genuinely like the best effects of the episode.
Yeah,
like seeing the bottom of the ocean. They kind of been that deep, otherwise there wouldn't have been that much light. But that's beside the point.
Yeah.
But then to use that imagery
for this
development, for this character development and this relationship, it makes it so I can't enjoy the imagery anymore.
Yeah,
because it's directly connected to this thing that I dislike.
Yeah.
And this thing that is just a huge, like, pit of nothingness.
Yeah.
And it's such a shame because, like, Chris Chibnall is responsible for my favourite single image, like, single shot, rather, in the show's entire run. He's responsible for one of the best crafted shots in the whole series. It's in Dinosaurs on a Spaceship from Matt Smith's era. And it's when Mark Williams, aka Rory's dad Brian, is seated on the edge of the TARDIS as it's in space, having a cup of tea and a sandwich as he looks down on the planet. It is... The effects are gorgeous. The music is subtle in the background. And it actually plays into the arc that he's gone on in this episode, where he's gone from a shut-in recluse to an open-eyed dreamer. And like that, like I keep coming back to that. Like when we actually watched that episode, I know it's obvious you don't remember the shot, but
yeah, I don't know if I've even seen that episode all the way through. In any case,
but when we come to that episode, you'll see why that shot is so stunning, and it's clear that that's kind of the tone that they were going for with this shot, because it's a lot of the same narrative beats, and it's such a shame I can't enjoy it.
That they wasted on this moment. I'm glad you kind of brought this up, because this issue of Doctor companion relationships has been churning in my mind a little bit. So okay, there's a couple of things to say here. So when you first addressed this issue in our first episode of this, I think you said one of the reasons why it bothered you was there was kind of an icky factor to it because the Doctor's meant to be like, 1,000 years old,
Yes.
something like that. And I don't think I'd given that element of it much thought at that point, but on reflection, like, yeah, I can kind of understand why you'd say that, because, like, yeah, I mean, the Doctor's, like, meant to be 1,000 years old, and their companions are...
Yeah, it's like,
not.
if you've got a problem with it in Twilight, and you don't have a problem with it here, it's hypocritical.
Then, yeah.
Like, it's not that much of an issue, because there's no one underage, but...
No. But, yeah, it's understandable. So, that element is there, but I think just even generally, and this is the problem that I've always had with it, because I've also disliked romantic attachments between Doctors and companions. It seems so pointless. It seems the best example I can think of is The Parting of the Ways. Now, there was a period where I went for ages without watching any revival Doctor Who. And then finally, I think I'd marathoned all of the first couple of seasons. And it finally got to The Parting of the Ways. And I thought, the ending is the Doctor looks into Rose's eyes and he takes out the heart of the TARDIS and saves the day. I'd forgotten that he kisses her, yeah? And that's how it happens. Well, here's the thing. If I forgot that detail was part of it, doesn't that show how kind of pointless that subtext is? Like, it's not... It doesn't really do anything. Because if you want to just show that the Doctor is trying to get in touch with, their humanity, or, what they admire about humanity, I suppose, you can do that without any romantic subplot. You can... I don't know, maybe this seems sort of cliche, but, like, you really can just do it with friendship. Like, what's the point? There's no... And
it's the laziest way to get someone to care about a character dynamic.
Yeah, it's just... Again, because... And those friendships are really interesting. Yeah. Like, what's the point of adding that...
It's so much harder to write a friendship, though. Like, because then you have to ask, why are they friends? What makes them tick? With a relationship, it's easy. You just go, oh, they're in love. That's all we need to write.
But I find, like, even the speech that the Doctor gave near the end of this episode, where it's like, oh, nothing ever really lasts, and I can't fix myself to anything. You can do that without a romantic subtext. You can do that with just a really good friendship. So... I don't know.
But I do like the metaphor, I can't fix myself to anything, like...
Yeah, oh, no, yeah, that bit, that is quite good. Again, it's just a shame it's not contextualized in a more workable, sort of, again, friendship framework.
I mean, I am at least grateful this episode doesn't end with, with the Doctor going, but sod it, and then, like, starting the relationship anyway. I'm glad that they are, like, committing to this kind of melancholy kind of, oh, I wish we could, but we can't.
Yeah, which is
still, I think, not great, but
I think that made that last sort of conversation actually probably one of the best bits in the whole episode for me. For that reason, the fact that they're sort of dedicating themselves to this tone, which is
they still have no chemistry.
Good. Yeah,
it's still incredibly obvious that it's just being written to put in some representation. Like, it is so showing that the Doctor and Yaz have been companions, and they've had this Doctor-companion relationship since 2018. And the 1-minute conversation between Dan and Diane was brimming with chemistry, miles ahead of anything that the Doctor and Yaz have ever shown towards each other.
Yeah. And again, I think it's worth bearing in mind that with this whole element of having the romantic subplots, I think it's more important that we sort of lay responsibility for that at RTD's feet for all the great things that he did with it. I still find it frustrating that he introduced that into the show, because again, I believe that you could have gotten away with all these relationships just being friendships without these romantic subplots, but it is more noticeable here because, as you say, there is a lack of chemistry there between Yaz and the Doctor.
Well, it's interesting that you say that, like, the fact that you forgot it was a kiss means that it didn't have to be romantic. My interpretation of that is the fact that you forgot it was a kiss means that it actually meant something more than just a kiss, like, you know, there's a deeper complexity there that the Dr. Rose dynamic
Oh, yes, I see what you mean, yeah.
like, you know, it's more than at that stage anyway. It was more than just a romance, and the kiss was like, you know, it told more than just the romance. I don't know. Well, when we actually get to Parting of the Ways, we'll be able to dissect that
we'll talk
moment
about this, yeah.
a lot more.
He's
also
but
technically
either way, yeah, that was
kissing
just
the
an
TARDIS
observation.
then. So, Sea Devils?
Yeah, they're
there.
They're there. And they're doing stuff.
Yep.
The one thing I will say about them, which I found kind of interesting, was the voices.
Yeah.
Because that I will admit this, the way they kind of incorporated that what actually seemed kind of innovative to me.
Using the voice modulator.
Yeah, because
but it harkens back
so
to the classics, doesn't it? Like,
yeah,
because
it's a Dalek thing.
They couldn't do like actual mouth movements, so they just kind of did
so
like
they
weird facial twitches instead.
It reminds me, with the Daleks, for example, I can't remember where I got this info from. I think it might have been on the Dalek Tapes, which is a very good documentary on the genesis of the Dalek special features, which, by the way, everybody who's listening to this should go watch it if they can get it. But I think they said in it that the reason why the Daleks had the light bulbs at all was so the directors, either it was either the directors or editors could tell which Dalek was talking.
Oh, yeah.
So that seems like a very interesting, strange thing that they did. And the fact that they sort of worked it in as seamlessly as they did, where you have these little glowing things on their chest, I thought, oh, okay, so this is like a Dalek thing they're doing. Oh, that's kind of cool. So yeah, that was just an interesting little quirk that they had, and I find it cool that they worked it in that way, because again, that's a very Doctor Who thing to do.
Yeah.
They, as I say, presumably they didn't have enough money to do like really sophisticated animatronics, so they worked around it, and that's cool. I like that when Doctor Who does that, and again, it fits with the tone of the show, and that's really interesting. And they also worked around the fact that in the original The Sea Devil story, the Sea Devil leader is obviously talking, but you don't know how. The mouth isn't moving.
Exactly.
There's no, and again, they're kind of learning from, I guess the mistakes of Classic Who, because even though I think that works in Classic Who, given again the stylized, almost cartoonish tone that Classic Who was going for, the very least you can say is there's no way you'd be able to get away with that in a modern Doctor Who story without having some kind of explanation or a visual cue to kind of circumvent that. So the fact that they were able to do that, I thought was actually pretty good, and I think honestly kudos to them for doing that. Unfortunately,
it is an interesting workaround. It's just a shame that their plan is all over the place.
Yeah, again, unfortunately, that's probably the best thing I can say about the Sea Devils.
No, that's where the compliments end.
Yeah, because they are just, again, they're just there. They're a monster that's doing stuff.
Yeah, well, they're doing too much stuff, I would say. Like, they've got a big, huge sea monster going around wrecking ships that could probably take out the land dwellers for them, and their plan is to melt the glaciers. Like, it's so many, like, point A to point B to point C to point D kind of stuff, and it's just too much.
Yeah, I felt like, even by the end, like, when I found out they're melting the poles, I think even at the time I thought, I feel a little bit confused by that plot. I'm like, why exactly are they doing it? I mean, I guess I get that it's going to be catastrophic, but, yeah. Oh, God, actually,
well,
I'm
also,
sorry,
like,
I just remembered...
if you want to have them melt the poles, fine, but, like, you know, it's just so many steps between, like, getting the monster to capture people, to take them to the undersea ship and rig up a ship to fly through the air above the ocean in order to scare people, which isn't really part of their plan, and then find a keystone which will help them melt the glass. Just get the keystone. You don't need all these extra steps. In fact, if you remove all the extra steps, again, you have room to give them back the complexities that they had in the past.
I just remembered just then a tiny little detail that I do want to bring up. Early on, like really early on in the episode, the Doctor and the companions are skipping stones on the water.
Yeah.
The bit where her earring gets dragged off by the magnetic field, like, the earring that she's wearing, did that come from somewhere? I'm simply
She
speaking
has
in
worn it
continuity.
before. It is,
But, like, was it important to the plot or anything, or does it just...
I think this is the biggest focus that it's ever had. I don't think it's ever been this plot important, if you could call it that.
Well,
before.
Here's the thing. I don't know. I found that small element kind of a little frustrating and pointless, because if you want to show that there's this magnetic field, we know that because the stones get dragged off. And what you could have done, you could have had this really nice little quiet moment of them just skipping the stones, and then the magnet field magically dragging one of them off, and that would have been a nice bit of foreshadowing to the end where they're skipping stones.
Well,
and I'm like,
you could have done that, but that would imply that they were aiming for a beach. They weren't. They got dragged off course. Despite the fact that Yaz keeps saying throughout the episode, you keep promising us a beach. At the very start, the Doctor's like, I wasn't aiming for a beach. Well, don't... That's inconsistent dialogue. Yaz is like, you said we were going to a beach. No, she didn't. And why is Dan dressed for the seas if they don't think they're going to a beach? Why did Yaz dress him up like a pirate if they weren't aiming for a beach? Is it because you wanted to put Dan in a pirate costume because he's funny? And that's a funny thing, exchange that they can have that goes nowhere and doesn't have a punchline? Is that why you wanted to do that, Chris?
Again, it's a very tiny detail, and maybe it might just be me, but that just seems, again, a little bit frustrating and pointless. But, again, that's completely consistent with all the other frustrating bits of dialogue that's in this episode and a lot of other Chibnall episodes.
It's also just the way that the Keystone works baffles me, that's what they chose to do. It's like, oh yeah, it flips the magnetic field from north to south and south to north, and then the poles melt. Someone should tell Chris that the poles flip magnetism. That just happens. Like, it hasn't happened in a while, but like every 1,000 years or so, north and south on the magnetic field flip.
Huh.
And ice still exists. I mean, that's obviously not a fact that's known by everyone, but if you're gonna write in that the magnetic poles flip, maybe look up what happens if that actually were to occur, and realize, oh no, this happens every 1,000 years or so.
I want to sort of move on to the bigger problems that I have with the plot for a second.
Okay.
Because So, there are a couple of things. One, the bit where they just abandon Dan.
Yep.
Where they're like, oh no, he wanted to go off by himself anyway, let's go and chase this treasure.
Yep.
Like, one, that seems like a very undoctory thing to do.
Sure does.
Just to abandon a companion.
Well, she wanted to spend time with Yaz, her favourite person ever.
God.
You see why that line irks me, right?
Yeah. It's like, there's a whole like, how is that consistent with the Doctor's characterization? The Doctor probably would have been terrified to leave one of, a companion just off on their own, wandering...
In the 1800s.
Especially given that, like, what's the logic that, we'll be back in a few minutes, by Dan's time because we'll just appear, but, like... TARDIS.
Compare that to in Rise of the Cybermen, when both Rose and Mickey are starting to go, like, wander off in different directions, and the Doctor has a very laboured discussion with both of them, trying to convince them to, stay and, like, not go off on their own in a parallel universe. Like, the fear he shows in that scene is, like, genuine. It's like, don't get suckered in. Both of you come back. What are you doing? And we see him, like, trying to make the choice. But here it's just like... And in that situation, it's a choice between Rose and Mickey. He obviously favours Rose, and he does end up going off with her instead of Mickey and just lets Mickey do his own thing. But he still cares. He takes a long time to get to that point. Here it's just kind of like, Dan's
Oh, yeah,
gone
we'll just
somewhere.
leave Dan.
Yeah, he's physically been tied up and captured by a pirate, but
Oh,
he'll
God,
be
like,
fine.
that doesn't... Oh my God, that is so stupid. And I'm actually now only
character.
And I'm now only just realizing how bad that was, because I remember watching it, and even the first time when I watched it, I'm like, really? Really? Is this what we're doing?
Yep.
This is where we're going? This seems really uncomfortable and mean-spirited and selfish of the Doctor to do. And what's the point? So she can go and get this treasure? And by the way, this goes to the other problem I have with the plot. Why are we doing that? Why does she need to get the treasure to give to Madame Ching to get her on her side? Again, that seems to me... I don't know, maybe I'm wrong here. Maybe my knowledge of the continuity throughout the whole series, maybe it's a little spotty at this point. But that seems like a very undoctory thing to do. To just go, yeah, there's this treasure that this one person wants for reasons. Let's go off on this random tangent and get it because... Like,
yeah.
That doesn't compute. That doesn't make sense. And again, here's the real, I think, issue with the plot I have here. If the element of Madame Ching having, you know, a crew that she's trying to save, and barter for, and children on that ship, if they introduce that element really early on in the story, what they could have done is they could have had the Doctor say, "Oh my God, you have a family, you've got friends on that ship. That's really terrible. Let me go over there and help you broker a peace and help and save this family for you." And again, I'm not
like they've been known to do in the past.
Exactly, like that's such a classic Doctor thing to do, such a gregarious and caring thing to, you know, want to help people. And then you could have maybe just brought in the Sea Devils later on, because if the treasure's got the keystone, then surely they could have worked in the Sea Devils that way. But no, they didn't go for what could have been a really interesting, thematically and thematically rich and character rich situation with real stakes.
Yep.
Like real serious, not just run-of-the-mill, end-of-the-world things like, oh, she's got children on this ship, let's go save them. But they didn't bother doing that. They just had the Doctor go in and get the thing to give to Madame Ching for some reason. Like,
well, also, if you have that as the A plot, and then the B plot, you actually like address the fact that the Sea Devils used to live on Earth, and it technically is theirs, and go back to the whole brokering, trying to negotiate, like, you know, so they can coexist. Like, if you have that as an actual B plot, that's a good episode. If you contrast that, But what do we get in this episode with the Sea Devils as opposed to, like, you know, regarding their actual backstory? What do we get in terms of the complexities of another species that used to live on our planet now wanting it back? Or, like, you know, possibly the possibility of trying to negotiate a peace. First of all, it doesn't try to negotiate once. Not once does the Doctor even attempt that.
No.
But also,
the
limits that we get of this is the Doctor saying to Yaz, you know, they came from Earth and now they think they either they want it back, they think it's theirs, or like they're coming back for it or something. And then Yaz says, "That's no good." And that's the extent of it. Once again, in the Chibnall era, sidestepping complexities, just working their way around the interesting stuff to get to the most black and white it could possibly be. No. We can't portray the Sea Devils as these sympathetic characters who've got hard done by in the past, and now maybe taking a bit too extreme a method, but could still be reasoned with. Nah. Humans good, Sea Devils bad. Call it a day. Let's get to the Centenary Special. You know what? 5.3 is generous. I'm disliking this the more I'm talking about it.
Yep, so am I. Honestly, that it's really heartbreaking that they didn't even try to do, that sort of thematic complexity. Because again,
we were so excited for this episode.
Even with the visceral gut reaction I had to the original Sea Devils episode, again, at least they tried. At least there's some complexity there, and they do it pretty well. Like, there's some wonderful bits in that episode that just kind of sort of chip away at, you know, sort of nasty imperialist attitudes and kind of sort of devaluing sort of the arrogance of humanity. And, like, there is none of that in this episode. They don't even try to do any of it. And incidentally, I remember when we watched Earthshock and you said he said one of the small issues you had with it was, to an extent, you wondered why the Cybermen instead of other monsters. Well, if Earthshock had that problem, this episode has that problem so much more, because
it has it in spades.
They are generic baddies. They are like under the sea. You could have had the Zygons, for God's sake, if you were going to do that. What's the point? They're just angry lizard people with Ninja Turtle faces running around whacking people with their swords, getting this treasure with nothing. There's nothing there. There's nothing underneath that need to have, scary monster that has nostalgia factor. And you know what? You're right, Cuff. The more we talk about this, the more frustrated I get. This is like so painful.
And look, we haven't even discussed the whole, the keystone is something that can that can imprison a creature in stone, and that's what the statue was at the beginning. Okay, why was the statue holding a tiny human then? Where'd that come from?
I'd forgotten that. I can't, there are just, again, it's almost like the frustrating bits of the plot here are the memorable bits, but like the important things of what gets the plot moving, I'm just blanking on them.
Yeah.
And I want to say, maybe that's me. Maybe that's just, I'm having a lapse of memory or something, but the more I think about it, I'm like, nope. No, it's the writing.
That's how...
It's just the writing.
That's how all of these episodes are structured. That's how Chibnall Who has operated. It's like, we've been mentioning surface level stuff and how there's nothing underneath. Well, that's not true. There is stuff underneath, but instead of the water of the ocean and all the fish and the aquatic life and the seaweed and the coral, it's all piss.
Oh. God.
Do you want to give this a score? I'll give it a 3.
Yeah. 4.
I don't think we need to explain why. We've spent an hour and a bit describing.
We've spent a long time.
God, do you remember how excited we were based on the trailer for this? Remember how much time we devoted to talking about, oh man, they look so much like their classic counterparts. Like, what could that mean? Like,
Once again, just a case of, I think Chibnall just dropping the ball. I'm like, what are you doing, man? What?
I'll tell you what he's doing.
What are you doing?
The Centenary Special. Let's talk about that trailer for a bit, because I haven't talked with you about it yet. Tegan and Ace are coming back.
I'm excited for that.
Do you think they're going to be done well?
No!
It's amazing that since 2018, when this era started, we were both like, oh yeah, this is good, I'm enjoying this. And now we're both like, no faith.
It's like, I can't... Yeah. Well, I went from cautious optimism to very dreary, pessimistic, sad, desperate kind of hope mingled with a lingering sense of dread.
That said, I am morbidly curious about the Centenary Special, purely because I'm like, what is it? How the amount of stuff that they've already shown for it. Tegan and Ace, for one thing. Kate Stewart's back. The character from Flux that I keep forgetting the name of, even though I've looked it up a million times, because although being one of the better elements of Flux, it was still kind of unmemorable. The Master coming back. Daleks are in it. Cybermen, including the lone Cyberman who is dead in the timeline, I was about to say, how is he back? Like, is this some kind of memory thing? But then, I don't trust Chibnall. He may have just forgotten that he killed him.
Maybe. Or, I don't know, he'll do some sort of paradox things like, time travel.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Sorry, I feel like just discussing this episode
we're both deflated,
taxing my brain a little bit, and I think my brain has melted a little bit. But, yeah, look, I'm really keen to see Ace and Tegan again, but I'm worried. I'm worried about what Chibnall's writing's going to do with both of them, because I like both characters, especially Ace.
He wrote Jack well. When he brought Jack back, Jack was written like Jack.
Although I have a lot of problems with how he was characterized as well in Revolution of the Daleks, but that's a whole separate thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I'm keen, I'm excited, but and here's another frustrating thing I think about the Centenary Special. The way they're building this up, they're saying this is when you die, Doctor, and they've got that shot of her, generating, and it's big and dramatic. And I admire they're going that route, and they kind of have to because it's regeneration, but, like, I don't care about this Doctor as much as I care about the others, and that's purely because of the writing, which, again, I'm sure I've said this before, but that is such a shame, because I really love Jodie Whittaker's
She's
performance.
a fantastic actor.
She is fantastic in Broadchurch, and when she's given good material as the Doctor, it's really, really wonderful. But she's given just these dumb character arcs and this painful dialogue, and it hurts when you watch it. Incidentally, I will mention the one tiny thing that I kind of liked about the dialogue in this episode. There is one bit when the Doctor says, something like, "Oh, darn it, I've been stitched up by a sniffer dog." Now, the reason why I like that dialogue is because it sounds like something a Doctor would say.
Yeah, that's good.
But it sounds like something that only Jodie Whittaker as the Doctor could say. And I thought, okay, well, that's interesting.
Yeah,
that's her bringing in, a unique element to the performance. That's kind of great. Shame it doesn't carry to any of the other bits of dialogue or characterization.
Look, at the moment, I'm cautious about the Centenary special. I'm happy that it's going to mark the end for Chibnall, but
yeah, same.
I am terrified that he's going to make one last big splash before he leaves. That we're going to get another big retcon, like the Timeless Children was.
Oh.
And it's going to wreck RTD's chances of beginning on a strong note.
Mind you, hopefully maybe RTD will just say, retcon the retcon or something.
He might say, nah, that was all non-canon, guys, don't worry.
Oh dear. Oh, goodness gracious.
Anyway,
I think that's about it.
We should wrap it there, yeah. We've been talking...
If
we talk about this too long, I might legitimately say, you know what, we're not doing the podcast anymore, it's not fun. We have finally reviewed a bad episode, though. So...
we did.
I'm happy with that.
Yeah, we
It's the first one that either of us put below a 6, I think.
Yeah, I think... I'm still definitely going with a 4 for this because...
Oh, yeah. 3 for
Good
me.
lord.
Alright, join us next time when we'll be reviewing The Unquiet Dead. For now, I've been Alex.
I've been Fitz.
And bye for now. I'm still trying to find an ending line. That's not it yet.
Geronimo.